It's 4:20 a.m. Hi, and welcome to episode 1 of the Stoned Witches Hour with Shell and Layla. Grab a seat, pack a bowl, and maybe turn on a few extra lights. Listen in as we smoke more than a little cannabis and tell true-ish tales of paranormal events, ghoulish crimes, and things that go bump in the night.
All right. I have a legitimate question for smokers, female smokers.
Ooh.
So, have you ever lit your thumbnail on fire?
Multiple times, especially after I've gotten a very expensive manicure, which is a big, huge pain in my ass.
No one ever talks about the drawbacks of smoking marijuana, and lighting your thumbnail on fire is one of them.
That's how you know you've met a fellow stoner. Look at their thumbs. First of all, we have the callus. You have the callus, right?
Yeah. The lighter cat, yeah.
Yeah, the lighter callus. And we also have melted nails. So
yeah. Not to mention, look at our lighters, and it's got like that bowl mark.
Oh, yeah. That's the first thing. If you look at the bottom of someone's lighter, like, hey, can I bum your lighter? And you look at the bottom and you see that it's a little melted, it's a little black, and yeah,
you know.
Good spirit. You know.
You know.
I hear you're gonna really scare me tonight. So I'm packing another bong in anticipation because this movie, all right, I know I'm spilling the beans, but you said it was at The Exorcist.
I did.
It scared the crap out of me when I was a kid. I think it's kind of silly now looking back on it, but it was very scary at the time.
Well, you better pack a bowl, because this is really an interesting story, because it was scary back then because we were kids, but now it's kind of unnerving as adults because there's truth behind it. And we're going to talk about that truth.
Oh, okay. That sounds fun. All right. So let me grab this. Why don't you hit me with some facts?
So it goes without saying that director William Friedkin's 1973 film, The Exorcist, is probably the most celebrated and perhaps the most horrifying motion picture ever released. This movie has won 9 Academy Awards. Pretty much the greatest horror movie of our lifetime.
It was definitely creepy. I do remember it. I mean, it looks so old now, although didn't they just redo it?
Yeah, but we're kind of old too, by the way.
You keep saying that. It looks kind of...
What I want to talk about is the real story behind the classic, The Exorcist. When you dig a little deep, you know, we all know pretty much the story of the little boy who actually in the movie was played by a little girl. But we all kind of know the story of the little boy, but there's a little side story that kind of briefly peeks into this and has a part of the writer's version of this. And I want to kind of delve into that. Yeah, like a little side story. It doesn't play a big, huge key role into the true story behind it, but there is a small piece that does. And when I dug a little deeper, it was intriguing.
Okay, I'm down for some side stories.
Like it was intriguing. So I want to kind of talk about some of the interesting things about the story we all know about the boy, but I also want to kind of delve a little bit into this little side story, because that's the part that I think maybe nobody knows about.
Ooh, all right.
I never knew that there were 2 legitimate documented stories that actually were kind of merged together to make, first of all, the book, The Exorcist, and then the 1973 movie, which was based off the book. It was actually 2 totally different stories. Everybody knows the boy, which obviously in the movie was a girl, but the real life story was a boy, a 12-year-old boy. There's a couple different towns that have been mentioned. Actually, this boy lived in Maryland, but ultimately outside of DC, like rural Washington, DC, but like in Maryland.
All right. So in the movie, it was a girl, and you're saying in the real life story that it's actually about a boy?
A 12-year-old boy, yep.
I did not know that. I'd never heard that before. I always assumed that even the real, true, quote unquote, story was about a young girl.
By the way, I just want to point out that in the St. Louis University's Pius the 12th library, there are binders of documents that relate to this.
Really? They have a ton of information about it?
Yeah, all of the news articles, the case studies, the newspaper articles, like there's like a folder, man.
Oh shit.
This was in 1949. So, I mean, it's a upper middle class type environment, to say the least.
Okay.
Some people call this guy Robbie, some people call him Roland, but he like was a Lutheran. So he was Christian, but he was a Lutheran. He had a favorite aunt. Don't we all?
Yeah, I think I have a favorite aunt.
You figure it's the 40s, and this aunt, Harriet is her name, gets him into Ouija boards. 1949, this kid's playing around with Ouija boards with his aunt. Probably opened some frickin' demon portal, by the way. Seriously. Then Aunt Harriet dies.
Like right after using the Ouija board?
Well, not like right after, but like
okay.
she dies. And the kid keeps the Ouija board is kind of like a
memento
of like, this was my aunt's and now she's gone and I loved her.
So the dude inherited a Ouija board from his aunt, like everyone.
It always comes back to a Ouija board, I feel like. Don't you feel like every story goes back to a Ouija board somehow, some way?
Especially in the 70s and 80s, it seems like every single story had a Ouija board involved. I do have to admit, though, I inherited a Ouija board, but from my grandmother. Do you remember the one that we used? Yeah, we've used it a couple times, I think, in some pretty spooky spots. The really old one, like the first run, Parker Brothers, 1974, I think, Ouija board.
Funny story. I also inherited a Ouija board from my grandma.
Of course you did.
But no, like here's the irony of my life. This predates Parker Brothers. It was from like 1949, manufactured in Salem, Massachusetts. Woo!
Oh wow, nice.
Talk about legit Ouija board. And I have some interesting stories about that we'll talk about another time. Actually, I bought a new one as well. I have a collection. You know how I am. I like to collect things.
You have a collection of tarot cards. I know about your quite extensive collection of tarot cards, which I envy and covet.
But I also have a mini collection of Ouija boards.
Oh, I love that. What have you got? Like, I know you have the super old Salem one, and you said you.
I got this super old Salem one, which I guess, kind of long story short, my grandmother bought back in the early 50s when ladies would have lady parties.
Lady parties?
I don't know what you call them, like sewing, like card parties, sewing parties, drinking parties. I don't know, like how I would come over and smoke and we'd hang out and smoke, but this would be like people drinking tea and having crumpets, and like there'd be like 10 of them, and
but
they wouldn't be smoking weed. But anyway, so like, they'd play cards and this and that. So anyway, 50s Ouija board, got it. Then my mother used it, and my aunt and my uncle as teenagers. And then when my grandma died, they were like, hey, do you want this? I'm like, this is gold, and you people don't even realize this. To me, It was gold. At 16, I got the Parker Brothers version for Christmas one year. Santa was kind. I still have that from my original one from my teenage years. And then I've collected about 4 or 5 other ones. Most recently, I got this most beautiful artwork one in downtown Salem, and it is gorgeous.
I think you showed that to me. That's the butterfly, beautiful blues. And yeah, it looks way too pretty to be a Ouija board.
Which actually they have the Ouija board history museum or something or other here.
Yeah. I remember that's part of the reason why you get Ouija boards. But okay, so we've ascertained like everyone obviously inherits a Ouija board from a family member.
Correct. Then they start having like paranormal activity in their house, vibrations to strange noises to flying objects.
Did they immediately connect it? Like, did it happen right after the aunt died, or was this like not connected?
It was connected, but they didn't realize it.
Okay, so they just didn't know yet at the time what was causing it.
Right. Basically, they felt later down the road, they realized this was probably like the infestation stage of possession. Okay. Like books would fly off all of a sudden. And then that's when like the bed would start shaking violently, which I'm sure you remember from the movie. Furniture moving across the room, the scratching noises on the wall. like any parents, you're going to be like, hey, maybe I should take my kid to the doctor because it's 1949. And where else do you take your kid if some shit's going down? You take him to the doctor.
How do you explain that to your doctor? Yes, my 4-year-old is levitating 3 feet off of her bed most nights. And occasionally we are noticing that as her head spins around, she's vomiting pea soup. I mean, how do you say that to your pediatrician?
So as you can imagine, the child was taken to St. Elizabeth's Psychiatric Hospital.
Oh, yeah.
Highly regarded place for the time, granted, 1949. Treatment required institutionalization and was basically often referred to as an insane asylum. The go-to is, you're freaking nuts, let's lock you away.
Well, didn't they do that for everything, particularly women at that time? Oh, you're cranky? Insane asylum. Oh, you have
Right.
bad periods? Insane asylum. Oh, your husband's an asshole? Well, you need to go to an insane asylum.
Well, listen to what they tried to say was wrong with this kid. They tried to say that he had like schizophrenia or Tourette's. So, back in those days, they just assumed the paranormal was nuts. He happened to get the parents happened to tell the story to someone who was like, hey, actually, you should get a priest. And they were like, hey, we'll do anything we can to try to fix this. The parents were able to get a priest to go to this crazy hospital.
Was he responding at all in the hospital? As the doctors were trying to treat him, were they having any success with him at all?
No.
Poor kid.
So remember, I told you they were Lutheran. So the parents were referred to this Father Albert Hughes. Now, this guy was Roman Catholic. So basically, that's the whole point of pointing out they're Lutheran, that now they're referred to a Roman Catholic, which is a little bit different, but I don't know how.
Okay.
This guy totally believed that the boy was possessed and ended up seeking permission from the Archbishop of Washington, D.C. to immediately begin exorcisms.
Yeah, I think that is something I've heard. Don't they have to get permission to do that? They can't just go performing exorcisms willy-nilly. They have to ask permission.
It's like you got to ask your supervisor kind of thing.
Right, okay.
So he goes and tries to do this, and then he can't do it anymore because the kid starts breaking off pieces of the mattress springs and slashing the priest with it.
Wow. Oh my goodness.
So ultimately leaves the first exorcism unfinished. Bad idea.
Oh no.
Then scratches start appearing on the kid.
So is the kid scratching himself with the springs, or did they take all sharp objects away at that point?
All sharp objects away, and all of a sudden the word Lewis is carved into him. Okay.
No, a name?
So the mother
What's the kid's name?
Ronald or Roland.
That's
or
right. That's right. Not Lewis.
So the mother thinks that it actually means that they need to go to St. Louis where they have relatives.
Okay, why would you make that connection? Oh yeah, someone's carving the name Lewis into my son. That must mean the city, St. Louis.
She has this cousin who's going to St. Louis University. They put her in touch with this other father, Father Walter Halloran, and Reverend William Bodern. These are actually Jesuit priests, which again...
Oh, a new flavor. We're introducing a third flavor.
A different flavor.
Okay.
And they agree to do the exorcism with a whole bunch of assistants. So remember in the movie where they had a couple priests and 5 assistants? So here we are with that. They go there, that's the whole vomiting, mattress thing, kind of the same types of things that happened when the first exorcism failed. Ripping the bed apart, blah, blah, blah. He was they noticed that nighttime was when a lot of this happened. In daytime, the kid was pretty all right.
Is he still under the care of doctors at this point, or has he been released to his parents and now they're just going to different types of Christian priests?
They took the kid out of the institution and hightailed it to St. Louis. They're on their own now. So the kid's going in trance-like states, making those guttural sounds, things flying all around. The father decides he's not giving up, no matter what. All these horrific things are happening. So they decide at midnight. Why would they do this at midnight? They're going to give him the Holy Communion.
That doesn't sound like it's going to work.
It's not, because basically the way that the priest put it in his diary, which is in that library that you can actually go to,
Neat.
they said that Satan would have no part of it.
Satan wants no part of communion.
Right. All these things are getting carved on this poor kid. They're trying to like hold the kid down, but like what they do finally in the end. So, this is going on for months. They're trying to exorcise this poor kid for like, I think it was like 3 months. Easter comes. Is it like Jesus's birthday? Maybe that's what happened. Kid wakes up with seizures. Things are really bad. So they call Saint Michael. I don't know why they didn't do this before. As a witch, I would have even done this prior to this if all this bullshit happened for months.
You bring out the big guns right from the beginning, right?
Why weren't you doing this like 2 months ago?
So he'd be a logical pick. I mean, Saint Michael, they already know that he's like a warrior against Satan. So if they think this kid is possessed by demons, I mean, bringing out the big guns means bringing out Saint Michael, the guy who's got a big sword and is more than willing to use it against evil.
Well, and you figure these folks were Jesuit priests, so their belief in the saints and the archangels and all of that was extremely strong. So they probably felt deep down that if they called Saint Michael, they would somehow, some way win this battle.
And it's definitely a thing. You and I have both seen it where deep-seated beliefs, whether it's a deep-seated belief in Saint Michael or the cross or a pentacle or whatever your religious symbol is, if you have that deep-seated belief that this is protection, it is protection.
It is. Remember in The Craft? I love The Craft.
Me too.
They actually talk about that. The policeman, that his badge, the star, and he didn't believe in the whole witchcraft thing. And then he actually saw the demon guy, and they told him that because he believed in his star, that was his talisman to ward off the evil. And
was that
actually,
in Practical Magic?
Or no, yeah, you're right. Practical Magic.
That's right. The police officer in Practical
the
Magic.
Star, and he held the star up, and he's like, and it basically made the demon guy like go away temporarily because he believed that his star, his police badge, would make it go away.
That's right. His belief that his police badge was his talisman against evil. It's
right.
Yeah, it was so much a part of who he was. Exactly that. So whatever your belief system is, if you believe that putting your foot underneath the covers at night is going to stop the demons from eating your toes, it will. That blanket becomes powerful. It becomes a safe, you've made a magical space underneath it. And,
just so you know, I do that every single night, and I do believe that, by the way.
Oh, it's true. Everyone does that.
Ghosties can't get my feeties if they're under the blankets.
Well, that's a life truth. I think everyone, we all learn that as children. We just carry it with us into adulthood. We just don't talk about it.
Exactly.
We just know it's true.
So they call Saint Michael to kind of expel Satan from this poor kid's body. Saint Michael was like supposedly like fighting Satan for his soul. They are doing like this
right there in the room, there's like a saint battling with Satan over this boy's soul. That sounds fucking scary.
Yeah. So this happens for like 10 minutes, but like all these weird things were happening like during this battle, like that was like this 10-minute long battle. Like an X appeared on the kid's chest, and it's supposed to be like they thought that meant he was possessed by 10 demons instead of 1, and like,
oh, because X is the Roman symbol for 10. Yes, yeah. Points for me. I'm a stoner and I still got that. All right.
And like he had like a pitchfork shaped pattern with red lines on his thigh and like a snake going down his ankle. Like
this poor kid.
And I mean, imagine being like 12, 13 years old.
And getting all the stuff carved on you. Oh, that poor baby.
And then all of a sudden, like the kid just comes out of a trance, and he said he was gone and never coming back. St. Michael won. Their belief in their faith in that kind of pulled through for him.
Wow, that's fantastic. What a cool story. And the author used that story. It was his, he was looking at, you had said he was looking at stories of exorcisms, and he came across that local one, right?
Yeah, he was a student. The author was a student at Georgetown University outside of DC. He was taking a college course that this article somehow infiltrated and related to that course, and kind of dug into all the newspaper articles because it was happening at the time. I mean, it was like
kind of going on
at the time. Yeah, it was the headlines at the moment. He was kind of looking into the exorcism stuff separately in his college life, and in his outside of college life, the headlines is this current thing happening to this boy. you see in these articles, he's a writer, wants to write a story. Even though it like evoked negative reactions from like religious groups, do you realize, this is going to blow your mind, this guy actually wrote this novel to try to scare people into going back to church?
Wait,
Like,
that was the whole premise?
yeah. He really thought he'd scare a whole generation of people into going back to church. Like, sorry, pal, led me down the path to witchcraft. Ooh, that backfired. Like, really, he thought that the premise of the story would lead people to go back to church. He, during his classes at school, had been going into the Loudun, France incidents, the exorcisms that happened there, 1632, when that happened.
There were exorcisms that happened in France. This isn't just an American phenomenon. There were
actually, yeah, this actually happened in 1632 in Loudun, France, and kind of resulted in what became the witch trials across the world.
With the Salem witch trials?
You know, everybody in the free world has heard of the Salem witch trials.
Right.
Whatever year that was, I don't even remember, 1692 or something. We always kind of don't focus on the European witch trials. You know, some of the European witch trials date back prior to the Salem, Massachusetts witch trials. They're called the Loudun possessions. That's the name of this particular story that is also intertwined in The Exorcist, which I'll get to how, was actually also a notorious witchcraft trial that took place in Loudun. And this happened in 1634. And I'll get into the witchcraft trial part of it in a second.
So that was quite a bit before. You were absolutely correct. The Salem witch trials were in 1692. And so that was quite a bit, what's almost 60 years, 50 plus years before the Salem witchcraft trials.
58 years before.
Yeah.
What people don't realize is the second story actually dates back to 1634. So like we're talking, shit, I'm high. I'm having a bad math moment. What, like 400 years?
I can't even do math when I'm not high. Hold on, let me get my socks off so I can count my fingers and toes. All right, what are we doing?
1634. So like, I don't know, like 400 years ago, whatever, right. Like a long time ago.
Okay, long time ago.
In France. I don't speak the French language, so maybe I'm not pronouncing some of this right, and for that I apologize. But okay, so 1634, I think it's pronounced Loudun, France.
I think you might be right. I also don't know French, but I think that sounds right.
Yeah, Loudun, France, I believe. There was some issues with a nun and a priest, actually 17 nuns, I believe it was. And a priest.
Wow. That's a prolific priest.
It was the Covenant of Ursuline Nuns.
Ursuline Convent?
I think that's how it's pronounced. Ursuline or something.
Ursuline Convent or Ursuline Convent, yes.
All I can think of is Ursula from Little Mermaid.
Right.
And they were said to be visited and possessed by demons. And again, you know, I am not a French-speaking person, so I might be pronouncing this all wrong. The Catholic Church did an investigation, and there was this local priest named Urbain Gardier, and
Urbain?
Urbain.
Okay, that's a name. That's quite a name. All right.
It's 1634 in France. His name's not Steve.
All right, good point. I'm sorry, Urbain.
Lord. Listen to this. The witch
Urbain.
Urbain.
I'm sorry. I can't. His name's not Steve. Oh, it's Urbain. That's why it's funny. All right, sorry.
It's not Steve.
No.
But so this guy's a priest, and this
Urbain.
is Urbain the priest.
Urbain the priest. Sorry, I'll be quiet now.
You're high.
I know. I'm
Smoke a bong. Smoke a bong while I talk.
All right, hold on.
Anyway, Urbain is a priest, and as is true with pretty much all witch trials, he is like not a witch, being accused of a witch. And what happened was he was like this kind of debonair, kind of hot and sexy guy. I don't even know what hot and sexy in 1634 France looks like.
I have no idea.
Imagine, like, do these people, like, they don't brush their teeth, they don't shower for weeks, like when they do shower, it's in a river. I don't know what the expectation is, but apparently he was like a good looking feller. He pissed everybody off in the town because basically, whether they were young or old or single or married, he was pretty much fucking everybody. Yeah.
Oh, sleazy. He was sleeping with everyone in the town.
All the men in the town decided to try to persecute him.
Oh yeah, they're like, this dude has got to go. He's making
Because
us look bad.
basically their wives and their daughters were like fair game and they were getting pissed. Urbane, sexy man.
Sexy, sleeping with the whole town. Urbane.
Come trial time, all of a sudden, nobody wants to be a witness. So they had no choice but to let him go.
Really?
No choice.
No one?
Basically, in like 2021 terms, basically all charges were dropped for insufficient evidence.
Because no one would snitch on the town Casanova. Nice.
Because,
well, obviously they were happy enough with him that, everyone was like, you know what? I am not giving Loverboy up.
another problem that was going on in that moment is there was a king. It might have been one of the Louis. They had a wall around this town already. So like imagine this like medieval town that has like a stone wall around it, okay? The king wanted to tear down the wall. Well, the town was split. Like think of it like Berlin. Do we keep the wall? Do we not keep the wall? What are we doing with the wall here? The Catholic Church decided, no matter what they personally believed, as a church entity, they were going to side with the king to tear down the wall. Guess who didn't want the wall torn down and fought tooth and nail?
Urbane?
Urbane!
Why did Urbane like the wall? Was he keeping his lovers separate?
Probably. He felt that that's the way it was. That's the way it always should be. And just because the king wants it doesn't mean we should do it kind of thing. Like he wasn't really a rule follower.
Obviously, no care for the sanctimony of marriage.
Basically, he ended up winning the Battle of the Wall. And as punishment, because they couldn't convict him of basically being a man whore, they made him the priest of Loudon.
Wait. So they took the man whore and they made him priest of a whole city.
Yeah, behind the wall. And then like these people couldn't leave the town. They were stuck behind the wall. Like
so wait. Even better. So they took the man whore and they made him the priest of the like trapped people in the city. They're like,
you want your fucking wall? Then you ain't leaving. There were 17 nuns there.
Are these the 17 nuns he slept with? Yeah. Typical man whore Urbane. Okay, go on.
Well, because he's the priest and...
He's the priest, yeah. Poor nuns. Those poor nuns.
Now, these chicks range to be about 25-ish years old. There was a plague. It's like freaking now, 2020 plague. That was part of the reason, actually, why they were kind of, quote unquote, locked in the town. Couldn't leave the wall because they didn't want the plague coming or going.
Oh, so they were on lockdown?
Basically.
Last year? Okay.
Basically, plague is 1632. I don't know.
Okay.
But, you know, a lot of the wealthy people and a lot of like the doctors and like business owners, they had left before they were kind of locked in the town. There was a period where the people who wanted the wall to come down, they were able to leave when the decision was made to keep it. And it was kind of like, you want your wall, here you go.
Okay.
People were kind of isolating. Oh my God, I didn't even realize that it is like now. Even the nuns kind of like lock themselves in their little house.
All right, hold on. I need to do one more hit because I am not high enough for time repeating itself. Okay, continue.
So the nuns aren't getting any visitors anymore. And Urbane.
Because plague.
Because the plague. So they're kind of, even though they're like in the lockdown town, they're still kind of like not leaving the house.
Okay.
So Urbane was still visiting sick people and giving money to the poor. Gracious man. Gracious man.
Gracious in public, but then behind the convent walls, he was raping 17 women.
Then all of a sudden there was a nun. Now you got to remember, these are like 25-year-old kids. Probably have to be like, 18 to be a nun?
I have no idea. I think they were throwing their girl kids that they didn't want into the nunneries like left and right. So I think some of them were pretty young.
This young nun all of a sudden has a vision of her dead father. basically all these other nuns started having visions of a dead priest, like a recently dead priest that died of the plague. So they decided, because they're having all these visions of dead people, that all these nuns need to have an exorcism.
Of course.
And
isn't that what you do for bad dreams? You call in a priest and have an exorcism. Duh.
remember the kind of controversial scene with the crucifix in a sexual act kind of way?
Oh yeah, that scene. Yes.
That is what these nuns started to do in France.
Like for fun? Were they coerced? Did the demon make them? Like
I guess the demon made them, I guess. They decide to let Urbain try to exorcise the demons. But then 2 other priests got involved and blamed Urbain. And they said that Urbain was the one who brought this demon, Asmodee, and purposefully like possessed these nuns.
What? So Urbain was behind it the whole time?
That's what they were saying. That's what they were saying. These nuns are kind of quarantined in their convent. So like they're not even opening the door for anybody except essentially Urbain.
Right. No alms to the poor. No.
They're on lockdown. They are 100% quarantine lockdown.
17 women locked down in a convent, locked down in a city. No one can see them except handsome, sexy
Urbain.
sexual deviant Urbain. This is not a recipe for good things.
No, so he was doing some shady stuff, and that's where some of the tie-in to The Exorcist, the movie, or the book, either way. There is a tie-in somehow,
This is such a good story. I forgot. I'm like, what the fuck is this crazy demon-possessed dude gonna do next? I forgot there's a tie-in to The Exorcist. All right.
So, these 17 girls, young women, are being taken advantage of by a person they trusted, their priest. There does seem to be some weird stuff going on, because they really did it does seem like he was maybe either a Jekyll and Hyde, or maybe invoking something not so nice. I don't know if there were actual possessions of him, or if they're saying they were possessions of the nuns, but the nuns were doing sexual things with religious objects, not just crucifixes.
No.
They were masturbating on statues. They were doing some freaky deaky.
You said in The Exorcist that the boy was kind of normal during the day, like Urbain going to people's houses during the day.
Right.
Okay. And then at night he turns into a freaking demon and he's like doing all this crazy stuff with the nuns.
Potentially correct. Because see, I don't know how, or I don't know what he did. I don't know what happened. He could have just been a man whore who got possessed, and his man whoreness went all sexy demon. He kind of quote unquote put a spell over these girls, and they would just get violently horny and do some crazy stuff with some religious objects. And they started calling him a magician. Then it was like they decided to have these big hearings again. So they do this trial, the second trial, and at the end of the trial, they find him to be guilty.
So this time, is he guilty of being a man whore, or is he guilty of being a demon?
He's guilty of being a witch, essentially.
Ooh, okay.
Now that he's guilty, it's execution time. Crazy thing is, they tried to hang him. Lightning storm. The lightning bolt hit the noose and let him free.
No.
So they were scared of him.
No shit. They tried to hang the man whore, and lightning. Oh my goodness. Wow.
So then, of course, they were like, oh my God, you are a witch. You are a witch. Like all these guys jumped on top of him and tied him down, put all this wood around him and burned him alive.
Damn. That's a rough way to go.
And then they basically tried to say that the possession stopped with the nuns. And then that was it.
Everything stopped once Urbain was gone. So it was his fault.
Kinda, yeah.
Well, he was probably raping all 17 of those poor nuns. The poor things were probably like scared out of their wits of him. And when the other priests came, they were like, please, it's a demon.
Right. But to go back to the boy.
Yeah, how is this related to The Exorcist? Oh, because of the crucifix, that scene.
Yeah, basically. That was like the one piece. Still an interesting story.
Absolutely. So they stole that part and like inserted it into, oh wow, sorry. No pun intended. And they stole that story and put it in The Exorcist just for shock value. That's what he took away from that story. He's like, hey, this masturbation thing is way too interesting. I'm throwing it into The Exorcist story.
You know, you look at the story, there's a lot to it. And it's a very interesting story. I never heard about the Loudon exorcisms. I had no idea that was kind of the pinnacle of the witch trial movement. But yeah, you look at the whole thing and that's the one piece you can pull out of this, my friend. That's it.
I had no idea.
Where is your head?
I mean, obviously that's why they made this little boy into a girl, so they could include that sexualization in there.
Right.
What's a scary movie without a little bit of TNA, right? You got to like throw in a little sexualization or people aren't just going to watch your scary stuff.
And some of that vulgar talk where she's talking vulgarly about some of her body parts and stuff, that was also said to be some of the stuff that the nuns would do. The whole sexual piece of The Exorcist is what came from the Loudon exorcism stories.
I wonder if it was the same demon.
You know, right?
Right?
That'd be interesting.
It could be. We'll have to look and see a little deeper. I can't believe you found that. Like, how? I never knew that.
And you know, like I said, a total side story, but just that little piece that ties it in made it so worth finding out about that.
You know, that makes the movie so much more interesting now, just to know that it's not just one. Beside the fact that it's a true story, that you can go to a college library and look up the actual documentation of people that experienced this. Beyond that, to know that there's these other interesting historical pieces that were pulled into it. Like, how interesting is that?
Yeah, because again, you know, that was like what,
wow,
almost 400 years ago.
Amazing the things that you can find when you get high and go down a rabbit hole.
Seriously, dig a little deeper, smoke a little more.
You know, that's actually good advice. Dig a little deeper, smoke a little more. Things would be so much nicer.
So in the end, these priests like did it, man. They rocked it.
Well, like the seventh one they tried.
Yeah, right. And no one would ever talk about it after that.
They went on and lived their lives.
They wouldn't even release, like, technically, like the last name or the real name of the kid. That's why you don't know if it's Ronald or Roland or Robbie. They're kind of sketchy about that. The kid never admitted it, like grew up all these years and never was like, hey, that was me. I mean, that kid's got to be like 80 right now, if he's even still alive, and never once publicly was like, hey, that was me.
Just kept it quiet, never said anything, never tried to seek fame. But this guy heard about it and wrote a book about it, and then it became a movie.
Correct.
Wild. Correct. Oh my God.
And we think back at that, you know, that's like one of the original awesome horror movies of our lifetime. You know, we look back on some of those crazy parts. Apparently, they were one story or another, all pretty much based on facts. You know, you got the Ouija board that opened the portal. You know, you got the story from Loudon where the man horror priest is burned alive for being, you know, supposedly witchcraft. Right. To like this poor little boy who's getting his body carved up by God knows what. And then these priests that are doing whatever they can to try to save this kid. And at least the priests and the parents didn't just like leave him in that nut house. God knows what happened to the poor kid.
Right. Well, let's see. We have the bad priest and then the good priest to make up for it. Gotta like that.
Just interesting to see that what the true story of this was. And it's documented, and it's kind of weird that it actually is, because that was a creepy movie.
Diary from a priest. There's an actual written diary from a priest of what he experienced during this. That's just crazy. That's nuts. Absolutely amazing.
Nuts. So what are you smoking tonight?
After that story, I'm really, really glad that I'm smoking some of my favorite Gorilla Glue. Although I think we're not supposed to call it that anymore. I think we're supposed to call it GG, like GG.
Or GG4. GG4.
Right. GG number 5, GG number 4. But yeah, it's Gorilla Glue, and I really
I don't know
enjoy it.
why.
But yeah, I don't think the company appreciated having their name associated with a marijuana cultivar. But yeah, so I'm smoking some GG number 5 from my favorite delivery place, the gas station. It's pretty good. I like it. It's very tasty. It's got a really great high. It's one of my favorites. I first started smoking it when I came out here to California, and I discovered it because the garden shop that I went to had some clones. And while we were waiting to get our Gorilla Glue clones, they were packing bongs, which they probably weren't supposed to do, of their own homegrown Gorilla Glue. And it was just so tasty. And the clones came out great. Growing it was easy. Smoking it was even easier. Very tasty. So yeah, tonight I'm smoking some Gorilla Glue. How about you, Shell? What are you smoking this evening?
In the whole true spirit of getting it at the store this time, although mine's not delivery, one of my local stores had a sale on pre-rolls.
Oh, I love pre-rolls.
Yeah, basically it kind of came down to buy one, get one free.
Oh, I love buy one, get one free even more.
Right. So Sunshine Daydream.
Ooh, I like that sound. Sunshine Daydream.
Very nice. Kind of a happy-go-lucky high.
So you're smoking some Sunshine Daydream on the East Coast where it's all dark and cold and wintry. Is that helping you feel a little bit of that?
Shush yourself.
Yeah, it's gorgeous here. It's gorgeous.
Yeah, well, it's getting ready to snow here, so whatever.
Oh, well, it sucks to be you.
Yeah, pretty much.
All right, Shell, spark up a pre-roll. Make sure you've got those lights turned on. Are you ready for a story?
Uh-oh. Let's see. Scare me.
All right, you got it. Here goes. Like any good ghost story, I'm going to start. It was a dark and stormy night. Okay, not really, but it had just been storming and the wet pavement was black as ink. There was a young couple. Let's call them Kim and Pete. No reason. They were parked on the shore of White Rock Lake, which is near Dallas, Texas. And this is in the late 1920s. And you can probably guess what this young couple was doing, parked at the side of a lake in the middle of the night.
A little smoochy kissy.
So after a little interlude of, whatever a young couple gets up to in a car in the side of a lake, they were getting ready to go home and they turned their lights on. In the glow of the headlights, they see the silhouette of a young woman dressed in a kind of sheer white dress outlined against the dark shadows of the lake. This young woman moves closer to them, and in the light of the headlights, they can see that she is soaking wet from head to toe. The dress is just clinging to her in the cold, and her blonde hair, it's always a blonde, Shell. Why is that?
Really?
Right?
I don't know. I think they think we're stupid.
Like why? So her blonde hair is soaked and just clinging to her face, her shoulders, and her back. The poor thing is just drenched. She speaks in a faltering voice and she sounds distraught, and her voice is hoarse as if she'd just been crying or really cold. And haltingly, she tells them that she had been on a boat on the lake with her fiance and her friends and that there'd been an accident. Between sobs, she says something about the boat capsizing and that all her friends are safe, but she had somehow become separated them when trying to get to the shore and that she needs to go home. And Pete, being the gentleman that he is, gives her his coat to wrap around her scantily clad body, and she climbs into the rumble seat of a car.
Is it like the back seat?
Not only is it a back seat, but it's like, picture an old like 1920s car where it's just like a two-seater, right? And then it has like this big trunk off the back. Well,
yeah.
The trunk folds up backwards and basically makes a bench seat outside the car. So that's your rumble seat or your mother-in-law seat, right? Like it's
like the Munsters?
Yes. So it's like a trunk seat. They're not actually sitting in the car with you. They're like kind of outside the car. So she decides to climb into the rumble seat of the car because she's soaking wet. She doesn't want to squeeze in with the couple. So she sits in the seat and gives them an address that's just a few minutes away from the lake. As they're driving to this address, Kim is like clinging up next to Pete and nervously glancing at the beautiful young woman in the rumble seat. And she sees that this woman doesn't speak again, but is just kind of sobbing quietly and staring off into the distance. After a few minutes of this, Kim notices that the young woman appears to have fallen asleep.
And when they get to the house and are pulling in the driveway, Kim tells Pete not to wake the woman as they're pulling in because she just feels so terrible for her. So they pull in and Pete sprints to the door and knocks on it, just hoping that there's someone going to be awake this late at night to retrieve this poor, sad, cold girl from his car. The door opens and an older man looks kind of sleepy, befuddled, and confused. And then as Pete explains, he starts to look sadly resigned. Pete explains that this woman in white had given them this address, and she appeared to be distraught and in need of help. And Pete just really wanted to get her some help. As Pete turns to point to the woman in the rumble seat so the gentleman can see her, he sees that Kim is now standing outside the car holding his soaked jacket, and the rumble seat's empty.
Now, where'd she go?
Right? So she's nowhere to be seen, and Kim looks really scared. Pete's very confused at this point, and the older man gently pats him on the shoulder, and with tears streaming down his face, he tells Pete that years before, his young daughter had died in a boating accident while celebrating her engagement.
Oh.
Yeah. And every year since then, someone has come to the house late at night claiming to have picked her up hitchhiking, only to have her vanish before he gets there.
Oh,
yeah.
That's so shitty.
Isn't that so sad? So it's like some people say that she's still trying to make her way home and that she just can't quite do it. Now, the thing about this story is that it's kind of repeated all over the country. I'm sure you've heard something similar.
Everywhere. Every single state, I think, has a hitchhiker, ghost on a road kind of story.
You're not wrong. That is very, very true. There's like tons of them all over the place. And the interesting thing about this one is that it was first published in a book in 1943, and it was called The Ghost of White Rock. Yeah, it was written by a woman named Anne Clark, and it was based on a story that apparently kids had been telling each other since the 30s in high school. I did a little digging and tried to see if I could find if this actually had any truth to it, because a lot of people seem to think that this is one of the places where this particular story had originated. I dug around and I found that the area originally belonged in the 1800s. It originally belonged to two families, the Daniel and the Cox families, and they settled there. And it was not a lake at that time. It was just farmland. There was a little town nearby. They had a private cemetery that's still there to this day that has like 500 or so people buried in it. And in 1910, construction began on White Rock Lake itself in response to a drought in the area.
So they just made it?
They just made the lake because of a water shortage. So they basically took these farms and turned most of it into a lake. And the cemetery is still there, but not much else remains of what had been there. During World War II, it was used by the U.S. Army to induct recruits. And there were actually 403 German prisoners of war housed there. So it didn't have the greatest history as the happy place. So the lake itself was created in 1910. The earliest written account is the story that Anne Clark wrote in 1943, and she wrote it about stories, again, that had been circulating since the 1930s. I did find that in May of 1929, now remember May, so May of 1929, 3 young boys drowned there in a boating accident.
Oh.
Yeah, so a group of kids, I guess they used to regularly go out in these homemade boats, and they would go fishing. And on this particular day, one of the boats capsized and 3 of the young boys in it drowned.
I feel like a homemade boat, you're already taking your chances.
You'd think. Apparently, they did it regularly, but on this particular day, yeah, their luck ran out. But none of them are obviously a young woman. So I didn't think that, although that fit the time frame, and it is a tragedy that occurred in the lake, it didn't really fit a story of a young woman. There were 2 young women that died in the lake. Louise Ford Davis, age 38, drowned herself there July 5th of 1935.
Broken heart?
They think so. Her sister found a distressing note and alerted police, and emergency responders rushed to the lake only to pull her lifeless body from it moments too late. They did find a suicide note and her white gloves carefully folded in the seat of her car. And it is rumored that it was a broken heart.
Yeah. It's always a guy.
But again, she didn't die in a boating accident.
True.
The second story that was easily found was another distraught woman, this time in November of 1942. A 35-year-old
Rose Stone committed suicide also by drowning herself in the lake. And she was discovered there after a brief search. And she had a note pinned to the sweater that she drowned in, asking that her relatives be notified of her death. I couldn't find any proof, but that was also rumored to be of a broken heart.
That's just kind of a shitty lake.
It gets worse, Shell.
I'm not going to this lake.
No, do not go to this lake. It's freaking creepy. Yeah, this is not even the beginning. So after a little more digging, I did actually find what I think is the origin story of this ghost. And
Tell me.
I got you. We have the tragic drowning of Hallie Enid Gaston. This was in May. Again, remember that month, May.
Yeah.
This was May 26, 1927. Ms. Hallie, 19, a teacher, drowned in a boating accident when her boat and her friend that she was on with her friends capsized on White Rock Lake. Interestingly enough, Louise and Rose, the two women who committed suicide tragically in the lake, are mentioned all over the place. I can find mention of them everywhere. Hallie Enid Gaston was a lot harder to find, and her story matches almost perfectly. And so I just found it really odd that it was difficult to find any information about her at all.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so she was 19, again, a teacher, recently engaged, and she drowned tragically on the lake in a boating accident. And this, again, was in 1927, and the original story that had been published, she had said that it was based on stories that teenagers had been telling themselves since the 30s. That one really fits. There have been numerous documented stories of a ghost in this area on White Rock Lake. And some of them, they're different areas of the lake, and they differ in a few stories. Some of them, the woman says that she was with friends. Some say that she was on a dock. Sometimes she says she has to get home or she has to get to her fiance. Some people think that there might be multiple ghosts here because of there's so many different sightings and different things.
It's like a hotbed there.
It is like a hotbed. And locals say that there are places that are so creepy that they won't go there during the day, let alone at night.
It almost makes me want to go there just because they said that.
Right? You're not going in the lake, but you want to go there to investigate.
Right. Oh no, I'm not going swimming.
No.
You know, who knows what's going to be grabbing my foot and pulling me down? No way.
Absolutely. Well, see, here's the thing. Those, again, were not the only lives that this lake has claimed. More recently, in July of 2012, a young man named Joe Stephen Cunningham, he died on the lake after he and his son were paddleboarding and a freak gust of wind knocked them over. And his son was able to swim to safety, but the father was unable to make it out. And they found him.
Wow.
Yeah, they found him drowned after a brief search. And then
so this just keeps happening.
This just keeps happening. In May
again
of 2014, Jeremy Daughtry, also 21, and a friend jumped off the Mockingbird Lane Bridge over the lake. And Daughtry, unfortunately, had trouble swimming back and sank, and his friend escaped unharmed.
Holy shit.
Yeah, a lot of these people were around 20. The boys that I mentioned that perished, one was 12, one was 17, and one was 19. So a lot of young people. One of the saddest stories associated with this lake is in October of 2015, a woman, Patty Stevens, I believe she was in her early 50s. She committed suicide by turning her car on in her garage. And she lived in a home in a suburb on White Rock Lake. And the reason she committed suicide is that her beloved husband of 25 years had been killed days previously by a machete-wielding man as he jogged around White Rock Lake.
Jason Voorhees.
This actually...
I couldn't help myself.
Yeah, no, this sadly was a mentally ill former football player. But yeah, so this man was killed as he jogged around White Rock Lake, and his wife then committed suicide because it was too much.
Wow.
That's not all. There's more.
There's more. Dun, dun, dun.
The most recent one that I saw was in June of 2017, a sailboat capsized on White Rock Lake, again with a boat capsizing, again after a freak strong gust of wind, and a man and a woman got dumped in the water. The woman was safely pulled out, but the man couldn't be seen. And after a short search, they found his body.
Oh, this is like a bad place. Where is this again? Austin, Texas?
This
Where
is
is
near
this?
Dallas, Texas. This is called White Rock Lake. It is a park near Dallas, Texas. And the urban legend around this lake, there have been so many sightings of people picking up this hitchhiker that Reader's Digest named White Rock Lake as one of the world's most haunted bodies of water in 2018.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And that wasn't that wasn't like 20 years ago. That was just a couple of years ago.
That was just a couple of years ago. But interestingly enough, Neiman Marcus comes to play in this Lady of the Lake legend.
How?
So in 1953, there was another book published. It was about Neiman Marcus, Texas, the story of the proud Dallas store. And in this book, Mr. Guy Malloy, who was the director of display for Neiman Marcus at the time, he recounts a story in which he's driving home after work and a beautiful blonde girl,
Blonde girl,
appears on the side of the road, soaked, only she's in a very fine dress that his wife says is obviously from the Neiman Marcus store. And she said,
well, duh, of course it is.
and the wife says, "Stop, Guy. That girl seems to be in trouble. She must have fallen in the lake. Her dress is wet." Can you tell I'm using my 1920s accent?
You know, I wish you had the outfit.
So yeah, okay. Imagine me I'm going to do it again. Imagine me in a flapper dress. "Stop, Guy. That girl seems to be in trouble. She must have fallen in the lake. Her dress, her dress is wet. You can tell that it is a very fine dress. She certainly got it at the store." Meaning, of course, Neiman Marcus.
Of course.
Of course. So the girl asked them to take her to an address on nearby Gaston Avenue, and she doesn't say why she's soaking wet, and they're, of course, too polite to ask. And when they get there, the girl is gone, but the back seat is wet. Just a damp spot remains.
As usual.
And same thing, they go to the door, tell the gentleman who answers the door, and he says that it was his blonde daughter who loved to wear nothing but Neiman Marcus clothes, had drowned 2 years before when she fell off a pier at White Rock Lake.
Oh, wow.
The Neiman Marcus clothes make it sound kind of funny, but interestingly enough, Guy Malloy did not ever add that part. That was actually added by his wife much later. The original story that he had been telling for years to people, he was kind of reluctant. You know, you would have to kind of get him to tell it. And in it, there was no trace of Neiman Marcus clothes, but he did say that he had picked up a young woman and she didn't talk much, but gave him an address, and he wrapped his jacket around her because she was cold. Again, no Neiman Marcus clothes in his telling of the story. Took her home, and then she was gone and only his jacket remained.
You know, one thing I noticed about both of our stories is the real people involved aren't necessarily jumping out there to tell their story to everybody. It's almost like they kind of shy away from it and other people tell it and they kind of try to hide from it.
It seems like the people that had it happen are a little reluctant to speak about it. And in this particular case, it got very much embellished by his wife. She obviously threw the Neiman Marcus bent into it.
Well, yeah.
But there are a lot of different stories. The Dallas newspaper has several different accounts of people writing in. It was pretty easy for me to find people who have said that they have had something similar happen or know someone that something similar had happened to. Interestingly enough, like you had said at the beginning of our conversation, it is part of Americana. It's like woven into so many different states. And a lot of them do seem to have a similar origin story, maybe not quite as early as this one, but they're out there.
You know, I think that part of that is there are people who just go in a bad way and their spirit, their whatever sticks there, you know, like that we've heard it all, you know, somebody was doing whatever, got killed on the side of the road, and then they're forever walking on that side of the road. It's like their spirit stuck there. And I think that's what maybe makes that a universal coast to coast story, is because unfortunately bad shit happens to people. And when they die, they sometimes get stuck in that location. And sometimes that location is a deep, dark road.
You know, my personal theory for that is that a lot of these hauntings are, I guess, I think the term a lot of people use is residual hauntings, meaning that it's not really like someone's spirit or their ghost that's there. It's more like something so bad, so emotional, or so powerfully, so psychically powerful happened to a person in this location that it kind of recorded itself somehow on that time and space. And sometimes people, when they stumble into that, they can feel that energy there, or they might actually be able to see that recording play out in the form of a wet blonde hitchhiker.
I believe it. I believe it.
Yeah, who knows? It's interesting to me that so many different people, even some of them seemingly not having any knowledge about the history. Again, the original woman that I found, Hallie, she was very difficult to find. I did not see her name all over the place, even though her story most closely matches the ghost story. So it was kind of strange to me to see that the ghost stories follow the original story very closely, even though that one's not the popular tale that's told.
Right. And again, you know, these original people that these are based on are the people that aren't trying to brag about it and tell everybody who will listen. Right. They shy away from it.
Yeah, they keep it kind of close to the vest. So true. All right, I need to have some of this Gorilla Glue. Oh, excuse me, Gigi.
You're not allowed to call it that.
Gigi. That makes it sound like the cat from Kiki's Delivery Service.
Love that movie.
I love that movie. I loved your story this week, Shell. What have you got in store for us next week?
So next week, I'm going to take it to a scary place. You know, like I had stated previously when we've chatted, you and I have met in rural upstate New York. So I'm going to do a story from near Troy, New York, Forest Park Cemetery. There are places that claim that this is like one of the most haunted places. They have even dubbed it the gateway to hell. Dun, dun, dun.
In a cemetery, a gateway to hell? Why are people still getting buried there? Why would you even go there?
It's a gateway to hell. Why wouldn't you go there? Duh.
Okay, good point. I would totally get high and go there. You and I.
No, when I tell you, like, we're talking headless angels, like an actual iron gate that is like that
has ruined angel statues for me.
Yeah, no, like
headless angel statues. Now maybe I don't want to go.
No, like it gets creepy. It gets creepy. So yeah, we're gonna go to Forest Park Cemetery near Troy, New York, and it's gonna be spook freaking tacular.
I'm looking forward to it.
Where are you taking us?
Well, I'm gonna actually stick to my new roots. Since I'm kind of outside of LA-ish, I'm going to go to Hollywood to a very famous story. This is something you've probably heard of. I know we were talking that a lot of my stories, neither you nor I are familiar with, but this one is so popular. This one was so much in the media at the time and is still in popular lore and popular culture now. The Black Dahlia.
Oh, I like that. Ooh, that'll be great.
So, okay, you haven't heard of it then? I'm really glad. I am going to blow your mind.
Scare me. I can't wait. 1 week.
Even if you had heard of this story, I had heard of this story. I thought I was familiar with
Wasn't there a movie?
Yes, there was. I thought I was familiar with the Black Dahlia. There are so many books and movies and shows and I think there's a documentary. There are bands named the Black Dahlia Murder and all sorts of things. And her death is still unsolved to this day. And there's so many creepy and scary things around it. It's going to blow your mind. You're going to absolutely you're going to be afraid to come visit me. So
we're both going to be afraid to go back to New York.
We're both going to be afraid to go back to New York. That's right. So yeah, I'm staying here in Southern California with the Black Dahlia murder.
I'm excited. I can't wait. This is going to be great.
Thank you for listening. We really appreciate it.
You know, if you want to follow us on Twitter, We have a Twitter account. We'd actually love to have you there. We are
You have a
at,
Twitter account? No shit.
we have Twitter.
You are so on top of shit.
We're there, man. We're there.
So what's our Twitter handle?
Our Twitter handle is at Stoned Witches.
Okay.
Now, on our Instagram,
We have an Instagram.
we have an Instagram. On our Instagram, it is Stoned Witches Hour.
Yay. At Stoned Witches Hour. So our Instagram is at Stoned Witches Hour.
And our Twitter is at Stoned Witches.
All right. Awesome. Good for us. So yay.
Thanks for listening to episode 1 of the Stoned Witches Hour. Join us on episode 2 for the unsolved murder of the Black Dahlia and an upstate New York cemetery that reportedly contains a gateway to hell. Grab your favorite bong and join us at 4:20 a.m. for Ganja and Ghouls on the Stoned Witches Hour with Shell and Layla.
All right.
Cut.
All right.